Well, if you would please turn over to the book of Ephesians. The letter of the Ephesians. And who's the author of the letter? Okay. Rabbi Shaul, Paul the Apostle. Apostle. What does apostle mean? Okay. And it's Ephesians chapter 3. So, sent out. Okay, an ambassador. Someone who was sent with a message. When a king wants to meet another king or another group, he sends an ambassador to take a message. And so the shaliachim, the apostles, the sent forth ones, they were sent. And where were the apostles sent? Okay, anywhere and everywhere. First they went where?
To the Jews.
Okay, to the Jews. And where were the Jews, our people at this time?
Scattered.
Everywhere. So they went everywhere. They went out into the various places. They didn't go randomly. They didn't go, they didn't have a map and just go, oh, there all right, I'm going there. Who sent them? Adonai sent them. He gave them, and of course he spoke these through many of the apostles. Send here, go there. And so Paul, did Paul say to the Jews, yeah, you're not worth it. I'm going to go to the Gentiles. Did he say that? No, he tried, didn't he? He went into the synagogues, wherever he went, and he began to share the message. And how did that go over? What happened to him? Not as well as he would have liked. Stoning, beat him. It didn't go so well. Well, God is a God of continual chances. He's constantly sending messengers. And there's many voices, even in this world today, with the message who's speaking. And the message is God loves you. And he desires your company. It isn't believe in me or else. It's I love you. Come unto me, all you who are heavy laden. And what does it mean to be heavy laden?
Worried.
Okay, worried, burdened. I mean, what's there to be worried about? Everything. And it's in this life that we have the peace of God, or we can access the peace of God because we have a belief. And a belief and faith is not something that you say, I believe, but you what? We act out this faith through our actions. It's not enough to have mental knowledge. It takes deeds behind our faith. And what is a deed of faith, an example of a deed of faith? What's that?
Tithing.
Okay, tithing. What else?
Just being a servant.
All right, being a servant.
Going where you believe God is sending you. Doing
Okay. Yep, so it's about being this servant who doesn't just say, I believe, but who does, and there has actions behind it. Ephesians chapter 3 and verse 8, and of course the apostle is writing, he says, to me, who am less than the least of all the saints, this grace was given, that I should preach among the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Messiah, to make all see what is the fellowship of the mystery from the beginning of the ages that has been hidden in God who created all things through Messiah Yeshua. So what is he saying there? What is the essence of that paragraph? What was his goal? Say nice words, tickle people's ears with new theological concepts.
They would see Christ and his teachings.
Okay, they would see Messiah. And what's a key word there that's lacking a lot in our present day?
Mystery.
What's that?
Mystery.
Mystery. A mystery is something that what?
unknown.
Okay, it's something that is hidden. A mystery is something that really, at least in the scriptural context, it it doesn't have a logical explanation, how you can rationalize it all together. But it gives us clues, it points us in and gives us little glimpses into something. So what's a mystery in the scriptures?
The resurrection.
Okay, yes, the resurrection. What else?
Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Okay, the Godhead as three in one, yes.
Even so much as the reason for Messiah's sacrifice.
Okay, the reason behind the sacrifice, a virgin birth. Yeah, mysteries. And so in our day and age where so much of everything is rationalized and we have systematic theology that can explain everything. And what do you think that explaining everything does to us as human beings?
Desensitizes.
Okay, so desensitizes us. What else?
Also makes us prideful, thinking that we've got it all figured out.
Yeah, it makes us pride, makes us go, yeah, I got it all figured out. And what do we say? What do we often do when we've got it all figured out?
We don't need God. We become complacent.
Yes, we become complacent. We don't need God anymore because, yeah, thanks for sharing that, God, but whew, now I've got it all figured out. So now I can go live my life.
We become God in God's stead for our lives.
Yeah. And the mystery is there to keep us focused upon that which we can't control, that which we cannot bend to our will, but those that should be seeking God's will. The mystery. You see, the apostle spent the rest of his life to try to share with people the fellowship of this mystery. And God is a mystery. He's not explained completely in a book. He's not explained by rational minds. God, who we sang is the I am, is not contained, is uncontainable. It's like a curtain with something glorious behind it. And if you pick the curtain up and you lift it up and you look under there, you can see a little bit of what's behind, but you can't see the totality of it. Because God is awesome, and he's not a God who can be contained or controlled. Because if that's a God that we can control, then what is it? It's not a God, it's a false God. It's a God of our own creation, an idol. And the God of Israel is not an idol, but true and pure. If you turn over to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1. You see, in the beginning, God created everything, and it was good, he said. It was beautiful. It was pure. But there was a problem, because God is a God of free will, and he doesn't want robotic constructs walking around, I praise you, God. Thank you, God. He wants true and real relationships. He wants true and real people that are committed to following his ways. And so he gave our father Adam and our mother Eve a choice. And that choice was presented in the form of the enemy. Chapter 1 and verse 26, of course we know the story, we know what occurred. That they chose to become like God on their own. They desired it because they listened to the one who wanted to be God, but will never be God. And they chose to follow his teaching in their ears and say, oh, I can do this. I've got it all figured out. I will take this and eat and become like the Most High. And so God, because he is loving and merciful, do you think when he created them that this was a surprise to him? That somehow their actions shocked him? Can you see God in heaven going, oh, what am I going to do now? No, God sees all things from the beginning to the end. He knew that our father Adam and our mother Eve would stray and would fall. He knew you before you were created and born into the family that you were. You weren't born into that family as a mistake, because our lives are of a greater purpose and have greater significance than just where we begin. It's not where we are, it's the direction that we're going. And our God is so loving and compassionate that he provided a way to return to him in the purity that the Eden was. And so he promises this, and of course he addresses this, of course, to the fallen one. chapter 1 and verse 26. Oops, sorry. No, this is actually where he basically, chapter 1 and 26 is where he says, let us make man in our image. And what else does he say? According to what? Okay, a likeness. So an image is a sort of a debatable idea, concept when it comes to God. But what do you think his likeness is? Okay, his qualities, what else? Okay, his virtues, how he is, how he interacts, and who he is, what flows from him. When we sinned in the garden, we lost this likeness, this quality. And almost immediately after our forefathers were kicked out of the garden, removed from, actually by God's mercy, and humanity began to create more humanity, what was among the first things that occurred between Cain and Abel? It was murder. Now, is murder a quality of God? No. Our race began to act contrary to the likeness of God and act in the likeness of the one who deceived us. So, chapter 3, rather. Chapter 3 and verse 14, of course, again, this is addressed to the fallen one. It says, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all the cattle and more than every beast of the field, and on your belly shall you go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity, warfare, strife between you and the woman, between your seed and her seed. And he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. And so he makes this promise. This is the very first promise that God says. I'm sending somebody who will complete this war. I've seen other translations where it says that he shall crush the head of the serpent, but you shall bruise his heel. There's a degree of impact, I suppose you could say. So if you have a bruise, it kind of hurts for a while, right? Maybe it hurts a lot. But when something is crushed, it's not coming back. Yeah. And so in this warfare that has occurred, there has been a crushing of the power of the enemy. And so, again, we know kind of the later part of the story, but this is the promise that God makes to humanity, that I'm sending someone. Okay. Over in Genesis 4, in verse 25. Genesis chapter 4 and verse 25. It says, of course, this is after Cain has killed Abel. It says, now Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son, and she named him Seth. For God appointed another seed for me instead of Abel, whom Cain killed. And as for Seth, to him also a son was born, and he named him Enosh. And men began to call on the name of the Lord. And that statement is significant. And men began to call on the name of the Lord. It means there was a knowledge of God in those days. There was an understanding that there was a God out there who desired to interact with humanity. And so this prayer should be our prayer every day in our age. We should be praying that men and women would begin to call upon the name of the Lord, because the world is lost and dying and is darkened by the darkness of sin and death. When you know you're going to die, what are some options that you have?
Make final arrangements,
Okay, make final arrangements. What else?
repair damaged relationships.
Yep. What else? What is humanity's general response to death?
Is there God?
Fear.
What's that?
Is there a God?
Is there a God? Okay. Do we as human beings try to kill that fear through whatever we can? Drugs, alcohol, activity. We try to avoid the inevitable. We see a world obsessed with beauty and obsessed with everything that it can to grasp just as tightly as possible what it thinks is the most valuable. But it is that which it strives after, which is imminent, or I guess you could say imminent, that death is just a breath away. No matter how much stuff you have, it is a true reality. And so this prayer that people would begin to call upon the name of God, is it pointless to pray for our neighbors? Whether it's people literally that live next door to us or people that we know, friends maybe. Do we say, oh, you know what, I'm just not going to pray for them because nothing ever happens? What are we saying?
That there's not a God.
There's not a God? What else? I don't believe. He tells us to be intercessors. He tells us to be those that are actively working in the world. It doesn't mean we're changing people. Oftentimes, most of the time, it means we're praying for people and lifting them up. The results are not in our hands, but the prayer and the intercession is given to us as a privilege, as being His children. And so, even if we don't see with our eyes or hear with our ears, we should be lifting up the people around us, that they would begin to call upon the name of the Lord. Deuteronomy chapter 18. All throughout the various points of the scriptures, there are certain promises, certain directions that God is giving. In Deuteronomy chapter 18 and verse 15. And of course, this is the prophet Moses speaking to Israel, and he says, Adonai, your God, will raise up for you a prophet like me from your midst, from your brothers and sisters. Him you shall hear, according to all you desired of the Lord your God in Horeb in the day of the assembly, saying, Let me not hear again the voice of the Lord my God, nor let me see this great fire any more, lest I die. And the Lord said to me, What they have spoken is good. For I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers, and put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command. And it shall be that whoever will not hear my words which he speaks in my name, I will require it of him. So another promise of the coming one, a promise of the Mashiach. So this Yeshua, he didn't sneak in from Syria. He didn't, sneak in from Greece, on a boat. He was one of us. He was one of our people, standing in the line of those that had been promised. Of course, he is, the promised one, a prophet like me. What did Moses do for the people of Israel? What's that? Okay, he interceded with God. Why did he intercede with them? Why didn't they want to hear God?
Because God was going to be.
Because they were afraid?
Well, God was going to destroy them for the sin, and Moses interceded on their behalf.
Yeah.
And to the point where he said, Lord, take me and let me not see you, and that they be saved.
Yeah. Moses was willing to lay down his life for the life of his brothers and sisters. We said it before, Moses was a living example of the gospel. The gospel that Messiah spoke wasn't new as much as it was a revelation of what had been founded and had been shown through the various different teachers and prophets. So, contrasting Moses to Yeshua, what does Yeshua do for us? Okay, so he intercedes for us. And he shows us the Father.
He also shows us the way to salvation.
Mm-hmm.
He laid down his life for us.
And he laid down his life. Amen.
Penalty for us.
Yep. The Apostle Paul says, roughly echoing the words of Moses, he says, I wish that I would be blotted out, that they would see. And that's a heart of sacrifice, a heart that is willing, if it were possible, to sacrifice his own eternity so that thousands of people could see. And yet, Messiah himself was the one who laid down his life that opened up life to us. But these promises of the coming one, again, are so valuable. I feel like in our era, in this time, many believers, many Christians have it all figured out in their heads, and perhaps we are among them. where we got it all down. We know how it ends. We know all this. And we got all this stuff ordered in our minds, and it's all good because I've got it all figured out. And we become complacent, not remembering, not entering into the depth of the mystery that is our God, the God that is fathomless and deep. And so the more that we begin to approach him humbly and say, "Oh Lord, reveal yourself to me," the more that he begins to open our minds and our hearts to be able to perceive and appreciate his majesty.
Unfortunately, sometimes we think understanding it all means we're doing it right. And those are not mutually, they can be exclusive.
Truly. Yep. Isaiah chapter 7 rather. The prophets give us glimpses. They give us insights into coming things. Isaiah chapter 7. In verse 10. Moreover, the Lord spoke again to Ahaz, saying, "Ask a sign for yourself from the Lord your God. Ask it either in the depth or in the height above." But Ahaz said, "I will not ask, nor will I test the Lord." That's a good choice. Then he said, "Hear now, O house of David, is it a small thing for you to weary men, but will you weary my God also? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and you shall call his name Emmanuel." So, and what does Emmanuel mean? It was an indicative. It was like a story picture that God himself would be with us. In the translation of the Hebrew, the word for virgin is oftentimes by our Jewish people. They put in young girl. Like, that's a surprise. A young girl shall give birth? Well, it happens every day. There's nothing miraculous about that. It's just a fact of life. But a virgin giving birth, now there's a story. Miraculous. How is it accomplished? Well, that's a mystery. The mystery of how God created the earth. Do you think scientists can explain how God spoke the world into existence? Well, they can sure try. They're speculating. How did the Red Sea part? Harmonic convergence and sonic. See, foolishness. Humanity tries to demystify the mysteries of God. And they say, "Oh, she wasn't really a virgin. She was whatever the explanation is." But God says, a virgin who has not known a man will conceive not just a baby, but the most unique and special child that will ever be. Over in chapter 9. Chapter 9 and verse 1. "Nevertheless, the gloom will not be upon her who is distressed, when at first he lightly esteemed the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and afterwards more heavily oppressed her by way of the sea. Beyond the Jordan, the Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light, and those who have dwelt in the land of the shadow of death, upon them a light has shined." Is this a land of darkness today?
We need more light for that.
There is sadness and there is despair in this world. And it's a land of darkness, but there's a light shining. There's little points of light that are found all over this country, in the hearts and in the families, and in places like this where believers are gathering. And the light has shined in the darkness. And the darkness can't conquer this. This is God's work. But there is a great light that was promised and has come. It says, you have multiplied the nations and increased its joy, for they rejoice before you according to the time of the harvest. And as men rejoice when they divide the spoil, for you have broken the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, as in the day of Midian. For every warrior's sandal from the noisy battle and garments rolled in blood will be used for burning and the fuel of fire. For unto us a son is born, and unto us a child is born, a son is given, and upon the government will be his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. Upon the throne of David and over his kingdom, to order it and establish it with justice and judgment and justice. From that time forward, even forever, the zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. Another promise of the coming one. What are some of the words here that describe him? Wonderful? Counselor? Yeah. These are descriptors. He is called Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His name is Wonderful. When the angel appeared, and was it Joshua? I'm trying to think. Who was the one who said, "What's your name?" And then he was like, "It's wonderful. I can't even begin to say it." It's because in our earthliness we lack the connection to the mystery. Why do you think that in Yeshua's day, many of the Jewish exorcists cast out demons based upon what?
Their name.
The name of what?
The demon.
So to name it means you had power over it. And there was this connection with name and power. But our God is beyond all of that. He cannot be contained or controlled by any human being. And he is wonderful. He is beyond our understanding. I feel as today that we've lost this understanding of his majesty. We've, in a rush to have this intimacy with God, we've lost an awe of the living God. Without losing a desire for intimacy with God, we must also return to an awe of him in the awesomeness of what he is and who he is. John chapter 1. John chapter 1. In verse 1 it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and all things were made through him. And without him nothing that was made was made. And in him was life, and life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not understand it." We see that he's always been. He has been even before there was what we call time. And this universe, this physical reality that we have, he has always existed. How is God one, and yet he has revealed himself as three? How do we explain that?
One of those mysteries.
It's a mystery. But God has, in the Jewish concept and the understanding, is Godhead. It wasn't a Christian concept. It was a Jewish concept of the Godhead. As God is a compound unity. And it says that he was begotten of the Father before all ages. And that term is not used about any other being. The angels, are the angels the sons of God?
They are created beings.
We're all creations except for God. And so even the angels who are glorious and beautiful are still creations, just like us. But they're slightly different. We see that God is and has always been, and he exists in this mystery of being. In verse 14, It says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. God became flesh. How did that happen? How can the uncontainable, the eternal, become this, which hurts and sheds, which needs to keep feeding it so that it doesn't die? How could the eternal become something so finite like this? And if he was going to come, why didn't he come as a mighty soldier, a massive man who was looked as awesome? Why didn't God come like a conquering king like he could have?
All mysteries.
He came as a baby, as a child that needed to be fed and changed. And he was tired and he slept. The mystery of how God could become a human being will never be explained by science or theology, because it's a mystery. But he became this for a very important purpose. He became like us. He was incarnated. When we say incarnation, what do we mean by that? He became flesh. I mean, he didn't seem to be flesh. Many early heresies said that he appeared to be human. Or others in the opposite ditch said that he was just human, because they couldn't wrap their heads around it. And it's why so many places who say the word Christian today have lost the mystery of God. And they've turned aside to worldly things because they've got it all figured out. And in our mindset of as human beings, we say, next. What's the next thing? But God is a God to be contemplated, to be entering into this beautiful and awesome experience of God. And we begin that, of course, by our statements or our initial profession of faith, and then our lifetime journey towards him. Does the God that you serve always follow what you desire? I don't serve that God either, the God that follows my desires.
You said God is to be contemplated. And if we think about it from the enemy's perspective, he sees God as to be conquered, which is what the desire of men to gain all the knowledge that can be gained is to, in essence, conquer God, which is the plan of the enemy.
Yeah.
Not to contemplate the might of it. When we go for all the information, and it's nice to have knowledge, but when we do lose the mystery, we lose it's kind of like the honeymoon is over. In marriage, where, okay, we know everything, we understand everything, we think we got it all figured out. And that's what makes it die off, and we lose it.
Yeah. The appreciation of the unknowable. And yet in the unknowable, he begins to help us to know. He reveals himself, and we begin to see facets and sides of God. And it's a mystery. It's a beautiful thing. You see, he became flesh for a particular purpose. And what was that purpose? To see what it was like to be human?
To live with us.
He lived with us. And what was his goal in living with us?
To worship the same place, life.
Okay?
To teach us how.
To teach us how to get back to him. We
Draw men to God.
tend to draw others. It wasn't just for us. It isn't just for us to go, "Whew, thank God, I'm saved. Oh God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Help me, oh God, to be more like you." And by our actions, we begin to draw others to him. And maybe people don't acknowledge that about us. Well, Baruch Hashem, it's not about us anyway. But if we begin to inspire people to seek after God, then we're doing our job, which is humbling ourselves before him and allowing him to use us. And again, maybe we never see the fruit of that, but that's God's job, is to harvest the fruit. So he began this whole journey back from the very beginning when we sinned, our fathers and mothers. He said, I'm sending hope to you. I'm sending someone who will not just speak good and nice words to you, but will become and represent life itself. He became God. God became flesh so that he could point us in the true direction of him. Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1 and verse 46. And our mother Miriam said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit has rejoiced in God my Savior." For he has regarded the lowly state of his maidservant. For behold, and henceforth all generations will call me blessed, for he who is mighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. And his mercy is upon those who fear him from generation to generation. For he has shown strength with his arm, and has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He has put down the mighty from their thrones, and exalted the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent empty away. For he has helped his servant Israel in the remembrance of his mercy, as he spoke to our fathers, to Abraham and his seed forever. This is you and me. He has spoken hope to us. He has been one who has brought down the proud. And who is proud? Who's the mighty who thinks that they've done great things? And who is the proud? Is it all those people out there? Or do I look at these words and do I apply them to myself? I have been the proud one who has said, I will do all these things. And God has torn those things down. When it says that he has filled the hungry with good things and the rich he has sent empty away, what has he filled the poor with? And these aren't the words of being poor in financial sense, but being poor in spirit. He has filled them with good things. What has he filled them with? Hope. And what else?
His love.
Yeah.
He's given them an inheritance that they didn't know that they had.
The peace which passes all understanding, which can't be bought. It can't be rationalized. It's a real and true experience because God is the one who is doing this. The rich, those that think they don't need God, many of them sit every week in places of worship. But they don't need God. Whenever we look at the scriptures, do we apply them to ourselves? Are they about other people? Those people, they're like this. Or we look at the story of the leper, and do we see ourselves? The story of the woman at the well. The story of this or that person who life and truth and hope comes to. Do we see ourselves reflected in their stories? Over chapter 2 of Luke, in verse 6. And so it was that when they were there and the days were completed for her to be delivered, that she brought forth her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in the manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Now there were in the same country shepherds out in the fields keeping watch over their flock by night. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood before them, and the glory of the Lord shone about around them. And they were greatly afraid. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be for all people. For there is born to you this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Messiah the Lord. And this will be a sign for you. You will find a babe wrapped in swaddling clothes lying in a manger." And suddenly there was with this angel the multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace and goodwill towards men." And so it was when the angels had gone away from them back into heaven, that the shepherds said to one another, "Let us go now to Bethlehem and see the very thing which has come to pass. The Lord has made known to us." And they came with haste and found Mary and Joseph with the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen him, they made widely known the saying. which told them concerning this child. And all those who marvel at those things were told them by the shepherd. But Miriam kept all of these things and pondered them in her heart. Then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had seen and heard, as it was told to them. So, a mystery occurred. God became flesh in reality. It says that they who had called him Lord in heaven now crowded around the manger. And millions upon millions of angels were crowded around that place, seeing the unknowable, unexperienceable God had become a flesh human being. And they marveled, the angels did, at this mystery that God had become man. And the angels still marvel at God and what he is doing, because they try to understand how the unknowable can become known. The unapproachable can become accessible to all in this incarnation. We see that the impossible happened, that a virgin gave birth. And how is it such that a virgin could give birth? It's a mystery. Do we think that God only follows the laws that he has created? Can he not go outside of the laws of nature? Or is he bound by the laws of nature? No, he created it. And so if God, who can speak all things into creation, if God can stop the sun, and scientists say it's not possible for the sun to stop because of all of the implications of everything couldn't do it. And what is that called?
Arrogance.
Yes,
Sorry.
truly. A miracle. If it's a miracle, it probably can't be explained. Have you ever had a miracle occur to you? You all have had miracles. I have had miracles. Sometimes we know of those miracles, and sometimes we don't know the miracles. Our lives have been spared more times than we probably know, maybe a few times that we do. There's miracles occurring even today. What's our first inclination whenever a miracle occurs in our life?
Try to explain it away.
Okay? Couldn't possibly be a miracle because we can think of all the reasons why that this could have occurred naturally. Well, some things are natural, but then there's the miracles that are outside of this realm. Messiah is God, but he's also what? He's human. He is the only God-man in existence. Humanity and divinity have been merged in one. And it is a mystery. And he stands in heaven with the only glorified body as a human being, as well being God entirely.
Think of the miracle that each one of us, as who we are, the way we look, and what we do now, the odds, if you will, that would take for each of our ancestors to have been who they were at that moment in time, to have arrived at this place in time as who we are.
Yeah.
That in and of itself is beyond explanation, and a miracle that, a mystery that we can't solve.
Yeah. Yeah. So God brought about the next step in our redemption by becoming like us. And what was his goal in becoming like us? Okay. And what was the way? What is our destiny if we reclaim this? Become like God. Where God becomes flesh, he becomes human so that we can become like him. And what does it mean to be like God? Taller, thinner?
Be a reflection of him, especially in areas like the virtues.
Okay.
Just to be an example of who it is that we follow and have inside of us.
You mean we could become more patient?
It's possible.
Is it possible? I mean, I know we're pretty awesome right now, but is it possible to become more compassionate?
With
Do-
grace.
With
Because in and of ourselves, we will fall flat on our face every time. But when confronted with an issue where we would have acted negatively before, we call out to God and ask Him to work His virtue, His likeness into our lives, we will find He gives us the power through His grace to act as He would act.
it's His power working in us and through us. It says that it has enabled us to become the children of God. It's not a nice term. It's not something that we say because we're going to be like we are, but maybe we're going to glow a little bit. No, we will become like Him, which means reflecting His qualities. You're still going to be you. You may like that or not. You're still going to be unique. I will still be unique, Baruch Hashem. But we will be, our nature will have transformed. Our human nature will become healed. It will have returned to the innocence and the purity and the guilelessness. What does guilelessness mean? Ness? It's a lot of ness there. What does to be guileless mean? Can we imagine being guileless? Do we even know what it is?
Like childlike and pure, you don't sin in.
There's no intent.
There's no intent to sin.
No. A baby, when a baby begins to talk and a child begins to experience life, it doesn't know to be mean. You may have experiences that were perhaps.
Our youngest son, when he was a baby, we wondered,
Yeah. But there's an innocence of a child that has connection with where we're headed. And to be like that is how the fathers say that we can return to the state of Eden. Adam and Eve, do you think they were mean to each other? No. They were innocent. And they had a purity about them. And for us, I who am jaded, it's hard to imagine what that looks like. But if you've ever known a believer who has been a believer for a long time and that they glowed and they had something different about them, then you had a little glimpse into this return to Eden. It is about becoming like Him, and that's why His birth is so important, because it was God's mercy to us. It was His providing us not just with a story to tell of times past, but of a glorious future that we can share in. So, may we all begin to look at our God and enter into the mystery of what it is to be serving the one who is the creator of all things. That we don't take for granted the stories that we find in here, and that we don't say, oh yeah, I know that. But let us be those who humbly say, oh Lord, I do not know. I'm only a child. Abba, we thank you for the great gift of the mercy of you that you constantly manifest in our hearts. Lord, draw us closer and closer to you. Father, overcome the pride of our nature, for we only desire you. And let us set aside all earthly things that we may glorify you in all things. And we ask this in Yeshua's name. Amen.